But
Click on here.
I never closed YouTube.
Do you? Do you
Yeah,
always close it every
yes.
time? So click here.
Why am I?
Because it's a little bit lags. It has a lag. Are you unmuted?
But
Click on here.
I never closed.
Okay, you're on.
Do
You need to close the YouTube.
You always close
it.
it.
Right.
Got it. Okay, the usual. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Thank you so much. Just open.
Don't forget to record. Don't forget to record.
Yes.
Great.
Okay. I'll just answer Chavalea quickly. That was a dulcimer, not a lyre. A dulcimer. Okay, here we go. Welcome, everyone, to Merkavah, workings of the Chariot. And we have some really, really good, important things for tonight. So we're going to start with, towards the end of the first chapter. We have gone over this before, but you're going to see why I'm repeating this. It's verse 26, and it says like this: Me'al l'rakia, and above the firmament, asher al rosham, that was above these various angels that Ezekiel is experiencing. Kimar'eh Evan Sapir, there was a likeness to a sapphire stone. Demut Kisei, and this sapphire stone had the appearance of being a throne. The Al Demuta Kisei, and above the image of this throne, Demut Kemare Adam, there was an image of and a likeness to a Adam, Allah milamala, from above. This is something we've gone over already, but there's a missing part here that we haven't explored, and that is, what exactly is the throne of God? This is the first time in the vision of Ezekiel where he mentions a throne. And just to review, he is now experiencing the Ophanim and the Chariot, these different angels, and they are traveling. The Ophanim, remember, are called wheel angels. And in the chariot is the throne, and on the throne, he sees this image of a man. The commentaries tell us that it's really the image of God, but Ezekiel couldn't find a way to describe it because God has no description. And so here, one second, is the next verse. So he sees the kavod Hashem, the honor of God. So really this Adam was the glory of God. So the way I want to start tonight is we want to look at this idea of the throne of God. It's a very, very important image in Judaism. And here we see it in the vision. This is at the high point of the vision, is this chariot is carrying the throne of God. And really, it's God who is seated on the throne. But again, we've talked, paradoxically, he describes it as an Adam. Now, the reason this is so important is because in the vision of Isaiah, which we have gone over, he also sees a throne of God, but there he sees God sitting on the throne. There is no Adam. And in the visions of Daniel, he also envisions the throne of God and God upon it. So we're going to begin the class tonight exploring where do we see the throne of God in the Torah? Where do we see it in the rest of the Tanakh? So the first time it's mentioned is in Parshat Beshalach, when we fight against Amalek. This is where our arch enemy Amalek is first introduced. He attacks Israel from the behind, from the rear, and Israel fights a war with him. If you remember, Moshe goes up on the mountain and he's holding his hands up in prayer. And Hur and Aaron are supporting his hands in prayer. Yoshua is fighting the battle. But the end of Parshat Beshalach says like this: after we won the war, we did not completely destroy Amalek, but we did win the battle, we'll say. It says like this: Vayomer, and Rashi says, who is speaking? And he said, Moshe said, Ki yad al kes ya milchama laHashem ba'amalek midor dor. Moshe said, the hand of God is on the throne, and there will be a war, that God will have a war with Amalek in every generation. So there's much to be said about Amalek, about our whole Jewish history. But here, what we want to point out is, it says the hand is on the throne of God. When you look at the verse, Rashi is puzzled because there's a letter missing from the word throne. And there's two letters missing from God's four-letter name. Instead of saying the hand is on the kisei, it says case. And instead of the four-letter name of God, it's only the two-letter name of God. So Rashi says, it's a classic Rashi, an extremely important Rashi. And he says like this. He says, Yado shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu horma liyishva bekiso, that the hand of God is raised up to make an oath on his throne. Liyot lo milchama be'eva be'amalek olamit. There will be an ongoing war with Amalek forever, at least until redemption comes. But he continues, Umahu kes, why does it say the word throne missing a letter? And why is the name of God cut in two? Instead of the four-letter name of God, it's only two letters. So here's what he says. He says, Nishba Kadosh Baruch Hu, she'ein shemo shalem, ve'ein kiso shalem, ad sheyimche shemo shel Amalek kulo. God says his throne and his name will not be complete until Amalek is defeated. And when the name of Amalek is destroyed, Hashem Shalem, then God will be complete, V'kisei Shalem, and his throne complete. This is the first mention of a throne of God in the Torah. So it's very, very significant. And what it's saying is that until evil is defeated, evil is wiped out, then God's throne and God's name is not complete. So now you'll say, well, God can do anything. Why does he allow evil to exist so that his name is not complete and his throne is not complete? Again, we're talking in metaphorical terms here, symbolic terms. But what is being said is that once God decided that part of the plan of creation was to give human beings free will, then therefore there has to be both good and evil to choose from. And so in a certain way, God set it up in a way that his name will not be complete and his throne will not be complete because there is evil in the world. And therefore, there will be a war against Amalek in every generation. Obviously, these last 2 years, this kind of subject that we're talking about is very real. It's not just symbolic. It is very, very real. And it plays itself out on a daily level here in Israel, and unfortunately, around the world now. And this is our reality here. But we are told at the end of the Rashi, he says, but when evil is defeated, then this is the way we end the Aleinu prayer every day. V'hoya Hashem lemelech al kol ha'oretz, and in that day God will be king over the whole earth, and his name will, and he will be one, and his name will be one. So this is our introduction to the idea of God's throne. Now it's discussed because, again, we're talking in anthropomorphic symbolism. So what does God sitting on his throne represent? It represents God who is infinite, beyond description, beyond any concept that we really have. Sitting on his throne means that God makes himself somewhat accessible, makes him somewhat known. Because when you sit in a chair, you are descending. You're standing up. You descend in order to sit on your throne. And this is the whole idea of the 4 Kabbalistic worlds, that we go from pure light and spirituality. And as we descend through the worlds, we end up in this world, a very material, physical world. But that doesn't mean that spirituality isn't here and the light of God isn't here. But God sitting on his throne represents God making himself knowable as much as human beings can know. And that is the image here in the Maaseh Merkavah. Ezekiel is at the pinnacle of his mystical vision, his mystical meditation. And here, for the first time, he's encountering godliness. This was the Merkavah has taken him to a place in his consciousness where he can now have some kind of access, some kind of understanding of God. Now we're going to go to right before the giving of the Torah in Parshat Mishpatim. So for the days before we received the Torah, so God called Moshe up to the mountain, gave him certain instructions, certain understandings. Moshe came down, related to the people. The people said, we will do and we will hear, we will accept the Torah. As part of that, Moshe, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and the 70 elders went up on the mountain. And I'm reading here, this is at the end of Parshat Mishpatim, 24th chapter, 20th verse. V'yir'u et Elokei Yisrael. All these people, they had a vision of the God of Israel. V'tachat raglav kamasei livnat hasapir. And under his feet was a type of sapphire stone, sapphire stone. And it was like pure clearness like the heavens. Now, if you remember the verse we just read, it said Ezekiel saw above the firmament. That's what it says here at the end. In the clearness of heaven. This is where he sees the throne, and he sees an image of God sitting on the throne. And so what he saw, though, was the same sapphire. That's why I'm bringing this. And this is part of the receiving of the Torah. This is something that we've mentioned before, and I'm planning on exploring it even further. In short, the experience of all of the people at Sinai was a mass vision of the Merkavah. It was a mass vision. It was a once in a history where an entire people were in the state of mystical consciousness where everyone was experiencing what we call Maaseh Merkavah. And that's why in the verse that we read, again, it says, and above the firmament, here it says that they saw this sapphire stone like the clearness of heaven. In our verse, it says above the firmament that was above their heads, they saw a vision of a sapphire stone that had the appearance of a throne. So here, really, what the people who went up to the mountain, it says that they had a vision of the God of Israel. But what does it mean that at his feet was this sapphire stone? So Rashi actually says that this was God's way of identifying with the people. That's why he mentions his feet, that under his feet was this sapphire stone to remind him that way down below there, his people were suffering. So now, so here it's identifying the throne with a sapphire stone. And there are different versions of the color that is associated with sapphire. But in one version, it's a blue. And we know that in the Torah, when it gives us the mitzvah of wearing tzitzit, the fringes that we wear, that in the Torah, in those days, one of the strands, there are actually 8 strands from each of the 4 corners, 32 altogether. But of the 8 from each corner, one was techelet, a type of blue with tremendous significance. But one of the statements from the sages, they ask, why blue? Why a blue color with other strands are white? So they say like this, Techelet domeh yam. This color of blue is like the sea. So when you look at the techelet in your fringes, in the tzitzit, it reminds you of the sea, the ocean. The yam domeh rakia. And the waters of the Yam remind us of the firmament. Remember our verse that we're basing this on in Ezekiel. So Techelet reminds us of the water. The water reminds us of the sky. And then it says, V'rakia domeh l'kisei hakavod. And the sky reminds us of the throne of God, the glory of the throne of God. And then in a further version, the kisei kavod domeh le'even hasapir. And the throne of God reminds us of this special sapphire stone. So here we have what's called a stream of consciousness. We go from the blue of our tzitzit to the blue of the sea, to the blue of the sky, to the blue of the kisei hakavod, the throne of glory. And that throne of glory reminds us of this sapphire stone. So here, we see that in Ezekiel's vision, he is seeing this flow of consciousness here. Because in the verse it says, above the rakia, that's where the throne is. And the throne is like the sapphire stone. And so every time we look at the tzitzit, in those days, today, many people, again, have a blue string in their tzitzit. And so this is all reminding us, this all takes us back in a certain way to Maseh Merkavah and the giving of the Torah at Sinai. That's why I brought this verse of how Moshe, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and the 70 elders had this vision of the God of Israel. And there they experienced this Even HaSapir, this sapphire stone. Now, if we want to understand the throne in the flow of the Merkavah, so it would be like this. And this part of this that we've gone over before. The Ophanim, the wheel angels, are the angels of the world of Asiyah, the lowest, the world of action. The Chariot, these are the angels of the world of Yetzirah, the next highest world, the world of formation. The Seraphim in the vision of Isaiah, the fire angels, and in Ezekiel's vision, it's never mentioned the fire angels, but he sees fire all the time. Everything is flashes of fire in his vision. The Seraphim are from the world of Bria, of creation. And then you get to the throne, because all of those, remember, the wheel angels, the Chariot, and the fire, this is what is creating the chariot. And the chariot is holding the kisei hakavod. That's Atzilut. That's the highest level of Atzilut. But the Arizal explained and revealed that there's really a fifth world. Because who's sitting on the throne? The throne is the world of Atzilut, but who's sitting on it? That is what's called Adam Kadmon, primordial man. And that's connected to why Ezekiel is explaining that that's what he was seeing. He was seeing the vision of an Adam, but it's not necessarily like a human Adam. It's Adam Kadmon, primordial man, which is really not man at all. It's beyond that. This is getting towards the infinite light of God that is going to flow into Atzilut. From that comes the world of creation, and then it comes to formation, and then it gets down to this world of a material, physical world. Another very important idea is that the numerical value of the kisei is 81. The first word of the 10 Commandments is Anochi. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am the Lord your God who has taken you out of Egypt. Anochi has the gematria of 81. So what's the connection? Here we see that, as it were, God is coming down. It actually says in the text, onto Mount Sinai, and is revealing the 10 Commandments. God coming down to Mount Sinai is like God sitting down on his throne. And that's why the word for throne, 81, kisei, equals Anochi. I am the Lord your God. Again, this is connecting us over and over again to the connection between the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai and the experience of Maaseh Merkavah. In the book of Daniel, if you remember, we discussed the book of Daniel, and especially because he was seeing everything in series of fours, which connected it to the vision of Ezekiel. And he saw the 4 beasts. And these 4 beasts was a prophetic vision of the 4 exiles the Jewish people would go through. And the last one was the most terrifying of all of them. But from this beast, Daniel sees the Ancient of Days, Atik Yomin, which became a very, very important word in the Kabbalah of the Arizal, the Ancient of Days, and he's sitting on a throne. But first it says that in the vision a throne was set up, and then it says thrones in the plural were set up. So the Gemara asks, well, was it 1 throne or was it 2 thrones? And if it was 2 thrones, what does that mean? Is God sitting on 2 thrones at the same time? So there's a whole discussion, and 3 different opinions are brought. And it's very, very important to understanding the throne of God. So they seem to think that it's 1 throne, but it has 2 aspects. So Rabbi Akiva says that one of the thrones was for God and one was for King David. And if you go into the Tanakh, 9 different times in different places is it mentioned that David sat on his throne. Kisei David. And also with Shlomo, it says that his son Shlomo also, the kisei of Shlomo, and even once it says the kisei of Hashem, that Shlomo was sitting on the throne of God, but in this world. So that's what Rabbi Akiva says. That's why it's first it says one throne, and then it says thrones, meaning at least a minimum of two. Yossi Aglili disagrees. And this is very, very significant because Rosh Hashanah is coming. So Yossi Aglili says one of the thrones represents the throne of justice, and one of the thrones represents the throne of compassion or charity. And so in our prayers on Rosh Hashanah, actually Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur, one of the symbolisms that we are trying to keep in our minds is that we're asking God to get up from his throne of justice, because the whole world is being judged on Rosh Hashanah. But that God will get up from his throne of justice and sit on his throne of compassion. Again, this is a symbolic, metaphorical way to envision the energy of what are called the days of awe between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the 10 days of repentance, of tshuva. So that's what Yossi Aglili says. And then Elazar ben Azariah comes up with a third explanation. And he says, based partly on the reading that we did about Moshe and Aaron and the 70 elders going up to Har Sinai, where it says that they saw under his feet this stone of sapphire. And so Elazar ben Azariah says that one of these thrones was his throne, but the other one was his footstool. Again, this idea of God putting his feet, that's what it says in the verse, that his feet were on this sapphire stone. And he also brings a verse where it says, it's in the 66th chapter of Isaiah, it says, Ki shamayim kisi v'ha'oretz hadom ragli. So the prophet says in God's name, that God puts his throne, my throne is in the heavens, and my footstool is on the earth. And this emphasizes, again, this symbolism of the throne altogether, because the king sits on the throne, meaning he has to bring himself down. He has to bring his energy down in order to sit on the throne. And that's where he judges the people. And that's where he also has compassion for the people. Okay, 1 second. I'm just looking. Oh, here. And I want to end this section with a number of Psalms also mention this idea. One second. So here it says in Psalm 47, the 9th verse, it says, Melech Elokim al Goyim, Elokim Yashav al Kisei Kadsho. God is king among all the nations. God sits on his holy throne. So I'm just trying to bring many different mentions of God sitting on his throne. And then we have in the book of Jeremiah also a number of verses. So the first one is in the 3rd chapter of Jeremiah. And this is a very, very important one. It says, Be'et hahi yikra'u Yerushalayim kisei Hashem. And he's talking about in the future messianic era, where it says that at that time, Yerushalayim, the whole city, will be called the throne of God. Will be called the throne of God. And so that brings us, and there's a number more in Yirmiyahu. In the 17th chapter, it says, Kisei kavod marom me rishon mekom mikadshenu, where it says that a glorious throne is exalted from the beginning, is the place of our sanctuary. So the question is, what does that mean exactly? And for that, we're going to go to another very, very important mention of the Kisei, and that is at the end of the Song of the Sea. At the end of the Song of the Sea, it says like this, and this is something that is in our prayers every morning. And this is in chapter 15, verse 17. It says, Tivi'emo v'tita'emo b'har nachalatcha mechon l'shivtecha pa'alta Hashem mikdash Hashem kananu yadecha. It says, God, he will bring you and implant you on the mountain of his inheritance, meaning he will bring Israel into the land of Israel. Mechon l'shivtecha pa'alta Hashem, that the foundation of your dwelling place that God you have made, Mikdash Hashem kananu yadecha, the sanctuary, my God, that your hands have established. So here it's like stages. God will bring Israel into the land. He will bring them into the place that he will plant them, that is actually the dwelling place of God. And ultimately, he will bring Israel to the sanctuary that God's hands have established. So listen what Rashi says. He says, where it says, the place of your dwelling. Mikdash shel mata mikuvan keneged kisei shel mala asher pa'alta. It says, Rashi says, he's bringing a tradition where it says that the holy place, the temple that is below, meaning in Jerusalem, is corresponds, parallels the throne of God above that he has made. So this is the concept of that there's a Yerushalayim shel mata and a Yerushalayim shel mala, a lower Jerusalem and a higher Jerusalem. And we're told that the temple also, the temple below is a mirror image of the temple above. But here, Rashi, very interesting, says that the temple below parallels the throne above. So the throne represents the heavenly temple. And that is where God, as it were, is king. Because the king sits on his throne. That's the whole point. The king sits on his throne. That's why the highest of the Sefirot is called Keter, which means crown. And the lowest one is Malchut, which means kingship. Because it's the king who wears the crown. And it's the king who sits on his throne. So with that, we just to summarize, the idea here is that when we read in Ma'aseh Merkavah of Yechezkel, he only mentions a throne one time. And so I wanted to put it in a much bigger context. And one of the contexts which we are hopefully going to start now. I'm just looking at my notes, and I see that it might be better to deal with all of this in one class and not break it up. But what I want to say is that I'm going to introduce this, and we will continue it next week. We have just gone through the first chapter of Ezekiel. The way it ends is after Ezekiel has this vision of angels, of the chashmal, of the fire, of the aura, then the chariot, then the throne, and then the glory of God. And I'll just read it, that after he sees this image on the throne, then it mentions the chashmal again, that he sees again the chashmal, and it was like the likeness of fire all around it. And he again sees the noga, this spiritual aura. And then it says, Kamar'eh keshet asher yiyeh ba'anan b'yom hageshem. Ke mar'eh hanoga saviv hu mar'eh demut kavod Hashem ve'areh ve'apol al panai ve'yashma kol medaber. So the very last verse says that surrounding this whole vision, he says it was like the image of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day. And there was an aura of light all around. And there was the appearance of the glory of God. And I saw it, and I fell on my face, and I heard a voice speaking. That's how the chapter ends. That's how the chapter ends. And most people, when dealing with Maseh Merkavah, this is where they stop. In other words, it's neatly contained in the first chapter. That is what we call Maseh Merkavah, and we'll stick to understanding that. But what we're going to do next week, and there's no point in starting it now, is from chapters 2 to 11, what happens is, for most of it, remember, it ends, Ezekiel hears a voice, and God begins to speak to him. And it is a combination of all kinds of instructions, extremely interesting ideas here, which we'll get to next week. But the reason that I want to summarize chapters 2 to 11 is because in chapter 3, 8, 10, and 11, Ezekiel reverts to his vision as described in chapter 1. And that's why it's important not to isolate chapter 1. Because I believe if you stop there, you're not getting the full picture. And we're going to see it's almost like, we call it flashbacks. Ezekiel, he's talking to God. God gives him instructions. He does various things. And then all of a sudden, he's like back in the vision. He's describing the same terminology, the same kinds of symbolism that he's seeing. And then it goes out, and God gives him other instructions and teaches him what he should be doing, how he should be a prophet to the people. And then in chapters 10 and 11, like big time, Ezekiel goes back into the vision again. And so without tracing this flow, we miss the bigger picture of Maseh Merkavah. And so that is what we're going to do next week. And then one other thing that I will mention, because I want to do both of them in the same week, is in chapter 10 and 11, what happens is that a new type of angel is introduced. And in my research and contemplating this, I really feel that by understanding this new angel, it will tie together the whole vision in a way that we haven't exactly seen it up to now. So hopefully I am whetting everyone's appetite, but that's what we will be doing. Next week, we will be reviewing quickly. We're gonna go through all 11 chapters in like a half a class. And then we're going to try to understand this new type of angelic figure who's introduced and how in a certain way that holds the key to understanding the whole vision. For those who have, and it's most of you who have been following this series from the beginning, after that, then what we're going to do is we're going to take the vision of Ezekiel and put it in a much bigger context, because it's something we've mentioned repeatedly, is that the vision of the Merkavah is not exclusively Ezekiel's. So we've mentioned Isaiah, Zechariah, Daniel, but we're going to expand it even further. And we're going to go back in history, and we're going to show that the idea of the Merkavah goes all the ways back, even to the Avot, Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and how it has played itself out through history. We're going to learn some amazing stories from the Gemara about those who studied Maseh Merkavah. That is, they're fascinating. Then there are two Torahs from Rav Ginsburg that are absolutely mind-shattering to see the bigger picture of the workings of the chariot. And then we will add one more thing, and that is the four that entered into paradise. Arba shenichnasu lepardes. This is one of the most famous stories of the entire Talmud. And the idea comes that it's part of all these discussions of Maseh Merkavah. So it's obviously, how did they enter into what's called paradise? Was through the mystical meditation called the workings of the chariot. So that is where we're going with the series. We probably have around 4 or 5 more classes. I'm not confining it, but that's probably what it will be. And for those who've been following, the best is yet to come. Trust me, really, the best is yet to come. In a certain way, we've just been trying to just go through almost like the basics of this tradition called the workings of the chariot. What we're going to be able to do now is enrichen it tremendously and add whole new dimensions to understanding what we've been studying. So I bless all of us. Let's stick with this. Let's make it through this whole series. And everyone, please bless me to one day be able to turn this into a book. I'm already working on it. It could take years, but I'm somewhat determined to bring this to into the world. Okay, thank you, everyone.